today, okay. We thought today, in order to keep things on time, as people are coming in, that we would just start going around, just saying your name, where you're located, and if you feel like it, one action you could take to improve our democracy, but a very short, like 30 seconds. So, okay, Leo?
I'm Leo Jacoby in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, central part of the state. I was just talking to Edwin about trying to implement empathy circle practice in our church because we're involved in a synod process of listening to each other, encountering. So I think that would be my way of building a relationship within the church community, and has implications for civil community as well.
Thank you, Leo. Linda?
Yes, Linda Bass, Fort Worth, Texas. I plan to volunteer for to help at the polls. Our early election starts Monday, the 14th, and the election is on March 1st. So,
Thank you, Jenna. Jenna.
Yeah, hi. I'm Jenna, and I'm in New York, and I'm thinking of starting a peace walk near my house.
Where are you located?
New York City, Queens.
New York City. Thank you. Donna.
Hi, Donna Eisenhower. I'm retired here in Richmond, Indiana. And I don't know, I spend a lot of time, I'm pretty, because I'm retired, I have time to read all the events that are coming or issues that are requested to write to your legislators, either national or state. So I tend to help communicate messages to people who I think are interested in the subject. That's a very modest contribution, I know.
Not at all. Thank you, Donna. Judith.
Judith Kennedy from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Yeah, my contributions historically have been modest, to say the least, through writing, poetry, things like that. But I probably should get my feet on the street and start doing something a little more active.
You do a lot, Judith. Thank you. Glenn.
Glenn Masis, Marietta, Pennsylvania. Having just finished 6 years as a government official, was just talking to the head of the local Democrats today. I was a Democratic committee man for 10 years, and the person who's been doing it the last 6 years really doesn't want to do it and hasn't done it very well. So they would like me to come back and be committee person and work the polls, knock on doors, drop literature, etc. Write a newsletter.
Thank you, Glenn. Celine.
I live in Southern Oregon, a town called Ashland, and I have enjoyed writing letters for Vote Forward, and I noticed that they're geared up to start again, and I'm going to be doing that. Mostly the letters have gone to Virginia and Georgia so far, and I think, anyway, that's it.
Thank you, Celine. Greg.
Hi, I'm in I'm north of Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I guess we're telling what we've been doing. I'm really pretty deeply involved with Veterans for Peace. We're near the nuclear bomb factory, so we're working to stop nuclear weapon development. That's the main thing I've been up to.
Great. Larry.
So hi, I'm Larry in Florida. I'm a retired occupational therapist. And I'm guessing the question is, what are we doing to contribute to democracy or maybe peace? And I'm volunteering with Edwin's empathy circles and spreading them everywhere.
Very good. Jaron, are you on? Are we pronouncing your first name right? Could you say it, please?
It's Jeroen.
Jeroen, okay.
Jeroen.
Jeroen.
Yeah, it's like Y-E and then R-O-O-N. That's like how Jana spelled it, and I think that's the best way. But I can, as long as I can understand that you mean me, then it's okay. I don't mind. So I'm from the Netherlands, and I've been interested in empathy and Carl Rogers, and also I think this is really something that can be can cause change on a really large scale as well. I'm really like the belief that you start at like from the center. It starts from yourself, but in your family, in your neighborhood. I think all the political games, all the violence, the big things, I think they would be greatly reduced, if not disappear, if people on the personal level also find more peace. And that's why during the elections of Trump, the rallies, I was concerned. I already wanted to write a book, so I thought, okay, then now's the moment. I can wait until I can write the perfect book, but I think I need to get the message out there. And I wrote it, and nobody reads it, but it's for free. People can download it. Anyway, I thought, okay, I have to do it, so I did it. And yeah.
Thank you, Jeroen. Sorry, your name is covered. Oh, Randy. Hi.
So what was the question prompt? What are we doing for democracy, or
we're just doing like a 30-second thing. Your name, where you are, and if you want to say something about any step you want to take to improve our democracy.
Okay. Yeah, Randy Liaz. I'm in Irvine, California, which is in Orange County. And I have really been focused on conversations between the two sides. I work for Braver Angels, formerly Better Angels. And I think that it is just so paramount that we be willing to engage in the conversation, even when we are talking to someone whose beliefs may even offend us or really trouble us.
Thank you. I guess Edwin. I think we've covered everybody.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Not me.
Sally.
Did we miss somebody?
Sally, her video's
Sally,
off, so maybe you didn't
I'm
see
sorry,
her.
her video's not on. Okay, Sally.
Oh, this won't be good. Let me just keep the video off. Yeah. Sally Rodman. I live in Cathy's Valley, California. Well, this is all just totally new reading this book, and it's giving me, well, I'm just realizing a lot of shocking things that I didn't understand. And but I'm working in empathy with well, we're doing empathy in schools and developing a game that would reach children.
That sounds great. Edwin, I think everybody has introduced themselves.
Did everybody go? Anybody else? Okay, great. Do you want to go? Did you go, Joan?
Do I want to? Yeah, my name is Joan, and I'm in El Cerrito, California. And as far as my participation, I continue to be in my Indivisible group and tend to take on some projects, and I'm looking forward to getting back to phone banking. Edwin, do you want to introduce yourself? I have two questions that I wanted to tell the group about.
Okay, Edwin Rutch in El Cerrito, California. In terms of what I'm going to do, I'm running for Congress. I'm going to take the message of empathy and dialogue to Congress. Going to have all the Republicans and Democrats talk to each other in empathy circles. And we're going to get $10 billion for empathy and dialogue training. So that's one of the policies. So just a few of total transformation of this society.
Thank you.
So that's
Edwin.
it. Yay.
And the two questions today before we break up into our groups, and Edwin will put them in the chat box. For chapter 7, what role did conforming or conformism play in the Holocaust? And for chapter 8, who stated and what was the significance of the quote, whatever you may do, we shall fight on forever and ever and ever.
Okay, and I posted the chapters. We're on February 12th, chapter 7 and 8 on the book, and those questions. Oh, and we're on lesson 7, which is be reflected if you must be armed, and lesson 8, stand out. And then the questions are there, or whatever is really live for you in terms of questions. And we have one more person joining us. Move you into a room. So we're going to have 3 rooms. The first one, Linda will facilitate. The second one, Celine. And then the third one, Jana, and Larry will be in that room too as support. So I think we're ready to just jump in, right? There's not much else to do. Everyone knows how to do the practice, and we just get started. And we have about an hour and 25 minutes or so, I think, or even more. Oh, yeah. And I'll give a heads up, try to remember to give a heads up. And Deidre, if you just want to introduce yourself, we're just doing your name, location, and what you're doing to strengthen democracy, just in a sentence or two. You're the last person. You're
I'm
muted.
in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was training with the empathy circles, and I keep trying. Let's just say that.
Keep trying, keep at it. Okay. So is there anything else, Joan? Or do you think are we ready? Did I miss anything? You there, Joan?
Oh, I'm sorry, I said Jonah. Yeah, I think we're
Okay,
all ready to
great.
go into our breakout rooms.
I was going to be 5 people to a room because we don't have a fifth, another person for another room. So here we go. See you in the rooms. Oh.
How about, okay, we're going to be discussing from the book chapter 7 and 8, and each person will have 5 minutes to speak. I will time you, and if my clock works right, you should hear a little ding, ding, ding. Now, if you get to running on, and I just had it, oh, here it is. You'll get the pause sign. Okay. Any questions, comments before we get started? Okay, as the facilitator, the rule is that I start out being the listener. So who wants to talk to me first? Or will talk to me first? Any volunteer before I pick someone? Okay, Joan, I picked, oh, okay, Leo, all right. Okay, go, whatever you want to say.
Okay, thanks, Linda. I have German ancestry, so it's poignant to think of the Germany in the 1930s and 40s. My ancestors probably lived in Austria, and the chapter reading about not resisting the rise of Nazism in Germany is especially poignant to me.
Okay, the chapter on the rise of communism in
or Nazism.
Nazism in Germany is important to you, but you have ancestors that you believe go back to Germany and probably lived in Austria. And
right.
So you're very that period of time, the 30s and 40s are very important to you. Okay.
My ears picked up when Joan mentioned indivisible group, because I too joined an indivisible group when Trump was elected. So that I had a motivation to resist from the onset of his presidency.
Okay. Joan mentioned she was a member of the indivisible group, and you are too. And you've been a member of that group since Trump, when he first came into office. That was your resistance.
That was my resistance. I'm not active. I don't think that group is active right now, but you know, there were a couple dozen people that that met for on a regular basis, at least in the initial months of that new presidency.
So there were,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, I'm sorry.
Go
Well,
ahead.
you're saying it's not active now, but when you joined, there was approximately 12 people that would meet during the early part of his presidency.
Authoritarian impulse. It can be crop up anywhere and any time. And my career has been in the Catholic Church as a religious educator, but I've experienced, there's ups and downs in terms of who's running the ship. And I've experienced more of a authoritarian regime in my church.
Okay.
So, and now the church is trying to reform itself under Pope Francis by encountering and listening to each other and maybe healing some of those old wounds.
Okay, you are a educator in the church, and it's going through you've been an authoritarian. That's how you identified yourself, but now the church is going through a change under Pope Paul and
Pope Francis,
Pope
Yeah.
Francis, and it's reforming itself and getting into the listening and better ways of communicating, listening and talking.
Yeah, my brand of Catholic has been kind of suppressed in recent years. I'm not authoritarian, but some of my bishops and pastors have been. So we're trying to get out of that trench with encountering the other, including the other who is different from us.
Okay, so your Catholic upbringing has been kind of strict or staunch. I don't know if that's the word you use, but and you're not an authoritarian, but your bishops and some of your other associates will probably say that you are. And you're getting in, the church is now starting to reach out more to people that are not Catholic or not like you.
Yeah, again, I'm not I don't see myself as authoritarian, and
Yeah.
I don't think others do either. But
Oh.
the progressive wing of the church has been kind of suppressed in recent decades. But
Oh.
with Pope Francis, there's a revival of a progressive spirit that goes way back to the 60s with the Vatican Council.
Oh, okay. So you're not, you clarified that for me, that you're not an authoritarian or whatever, but the progressive part of the church, and other people don't think you are either. But the progressive part of the church has been kind of, what was the word you used? Dormant or suppressed. And it's starting to come around, change a little more, to what the progressive part of the church is looking for, wanting.
Thanks, Linda. I know anyone outside the church realm has a hard time understanding the church politics, but you did a pretty fair job. Thank you, Linda, for listening.
All right, thank you. To reset.
So now, Linda, now you're the speaker.
Yes.
And you asked somebody to listen, to be your active listener.
Correct. I'm gonna speak on that chapter that I think it was the 7th that talked about basically how, to be an authoritarian, to rise to power and keep power, you
Who are you
have to have
speaking to?
Huh?
Who are you speaking to?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just thought I was right back to him. Joan, I'm sorry. Oh, hold on. Let me stop it and reset. I went right back to Lou. Sorry about that. Joan, if you would listen to me.
Yes.
The chapter that talked about being authoritarian, to rise to that and to keep that position or that position of power, you need a regime, or you need the army, or you need the military, or you need somebody or some people behind you with the force to enforce whatever rules or whatever you set up.
Okay. I'm having a little problem with I have a speaker connected with clearness, so let me know if I make any mistakes. So as far as authoritarianism that they talked about in that chapter, they talked about in order to really be able to enact it, you can't do it alone. You are involving the police, you're involving the military. Is that correct? Did I get you right? Thank you.
Yes, you got it. And I see that today when people are protesting, peacefully protesting, especially when 45 was in office, how he used the military to exert his force and how he wanted to use it even more.
Okay, I did miss something there. Somebody is using the military.
45, I mean, Trump. I call him 45.
Oh, Trump. Oh,
yeah.
right. Trump, definitely. Yeah, he was using it
Yeah.
to get his authoritarianism across. Mhm.
Exactly. And, you know, in the book, it talks about the before the gas chambers where they killed a lot of Jews, they had the pits where they would line them up in groups or whatever and just shoot them. And they, you know, the pit was large enough to, you know, hold so many bodies, and then they would mass grave. And some of those men just did it. Let's put it like, I don't think they would have shot people like they did had they not been operating under orders.
Right. And in the chapter, they talked about how the military was actually used and would shoot large numbers of people. And they talked about them being mass graves. And you feel that this is, and I think you were saying they stressed that this wouldn't have happened unless they had orders to do this.
Well, yeah, because now some of them may have been cold-blooded murderers, but most of the time the military, they are taught from boot camp day one that you take orders, you know, unless it's illegal or whatever. And then, you know, whether something is legal or not today in America, it's a little gray area there. So some people just follow orders, and without, if they hadn't had the orders, they wouldn't have. That's my thought.
So you were stating that you know that the way the military operates, like starting in boot camp, this is how they're trained.
Yeah.
They're trained that they just don't make decisions. They just follow orders. And that's what you were saying.
Yeah. And what I'm afraid of is that, you know, we're very close to that point where so far it appears our military will resist when they think, you know, they've been ordered to do something illegal. And I know it's one, but I can't think of a particular instance right now. But like when Trump had the military, he used the National Guard to move people out of the way so he could go across the street and hold up the Bible. You know, I'm sure they weren't thinking about what was happening or why they were asked to move these people out of the way, but they were told to do it and they did it.
Right. And you were talking about a specific instance with Trump, where you think that there were probably situations where the paramilitary did not, they resisted. But this is one that you remember seeing, where the troops were actually used to kind of quell what was going on so that he could walk through and stand in front of everybody holding a Bible.
Yes. And what I'm afraid of that is that we're going to get to that point, but apparently the Pentagon and other people have resisted based on what they say people did not do on January 6th.
So you were really worried about where was this going to lead, but you have heard that basically they weren't following all his orders, that they were resisting, and that helped.
Yeah, as of for January 6th, yeah.
That helped.
Yeah, I do. I feel fully heard. Okay. So thank you, Joan. So now you get to pick someone.
Okay, I will pick Greg then.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, actually, I was glad that Linda brought that up because when I was reading those passages in chapter 7, I was thinking about all the things that Trump did with the military.
So, okay, you're saying that the reading in chapter 7, which what Linda said was reminding you of how and that chapter brought up to your mind all the things that Trump did using the military.
Right. Other instances were he wanted to have a parade of all of our tanks and all this. And as soon as I heard that, I was thinking, this sounds like Nazi Germany. That was one of his other big desires, to use our troops to show off that, you know, we could be militaristic.
So another thing was remembering that Trump wanted to have a military parade in a kind of a style of Nazi Germany to show off how powerful we are.
Right. And I don't know if I have the specifics totally right on this, but I know people in our country, we respect the right to have freedom of speech. And if we don't agree with something, to have a demonstration, a peaceful demonstration. And particularly, I remember listening to issues with Portland, Oregon.
So, and one of our main values or traditions in this country is the right to, if you disagree with something, you can hold a peaceful demonstration. And you remember something specifically about Portland, Oregon.
Right. It seems as though in that situation, he always twisted it that the peaceful demonstrators were the enemy of the people. And wherever he could bring in the Coast Guard, or, you know, they're not supposed to be used for that type of situation, he would use it. And what I think is dangerous in that the mentality of our country has changed. I'll stop. That's enough for you to go ahead.
The kind of sickening thing about it to you is how he twisted it around to where the peaceful demonstrators were suddenly the bad guys. And let's see, after that, I've forgotten exactly what he said.
So I felt like he twisted the use of paramilitary to quell peaceful demonstrations and instead called them the enemy of the people.
Yes, so he twisted the narrative around. He was using paramilitaries, and yet he was able to, well, he tried to call the demonstrators the enemies of the people.
Right. And when he did that, I think it was the testing ground that led to January 6th, where we saw military, we saw police involved in January 6th.
Well, okay, so in Portland, maybe it was a testing ground for January 6th, where we saw the police and military involved.
Correct. What is that, Edwin? It says ask to unmute. Is something wrong?
No, I don't see any problem.
Okay.
Everything's
Okay,
working.
it's on my screen, sorry. So I feel like we have some work to do now in terms of the general violence level in our country has gotten way out of kilter. I never thought I would be living in 2022 worried about so many violent people. And this is, I think, an end result of trying to get the military and the police to quell what should have been the rights of the citizens.
Okay, and you're worried now because there's a level of violence that you haven't seen before, and the military and police are being used to quell the rights of citizens to do what should be their right.
Thank you. I feel fully heard.
Or Edwin, do you want to
listen?
Okay. Oh, first, the hat. I'm not trying to be like project an attitude. It's just really bright in this window. So I'm just
You're just letting us know that it's really bright where you're at, and that's why you have the hat on. You're not trying to kind of project some kind of something there.
Right. Everybody else's turn has really raised a lot of thoughts. With very quickly with the reference to the Catholic Church, the Archbishop here is a great guy. I mean, I'm not Catholic, but he has come out with several anti-nuclear weapons statements and kind of put himself in danger there as far as his career goes.
So what everyone's saying, a lot of has come up around each of those from each person. And regarding the Catholic Church, you have a bishop there or archbishop in your area that's been a real anti-nuke advocate and put himself at risk, you find. And I'm hearing some real admiration, appreciation for that.
Exactly, yes. And I think some of the things that I've heard today also remind me there is, it looks horrible. Authoritarianism seems to be more open than ever before in the attempt. And I just remember, in a way, I think every single one of us inside, we have a dictator. We want to be a dictator.
So you're seeing the authoritarianism in the world, but also each person has sort of that authoritarian aspect, wanting to be a dictator in us.
Right. So, I mean, it's ironic. If I had my way, I would make everybody be peaceful.
Yeah, you'd be a dictator about being peaceful. You'd just be an authoritarian peacenik.
Yes. And that's just, some of the things Joan was saying, Joan, about the rise of violence. I can see that too, and I'm scared. But then on Monday, I went to work and my boss was playing an audiobook, and for 4 hours, I listened to an indigenous people's history of the United States.
So you have concerns about the violence in our society, but that when you were at work, your boss was playing like 4 hours of indigenous history. So you're maybe hearing that version of history.
Right. So what I'm getting to is that level of violence has never been absent. It's always been a part of the United States of America. We've just hidden it better.
So the violence that you're seeing now, you're realizing that it's always been part of the United States. It's just been hidden better than maybe before.
Yeah, I am relatively well informed about Native American history. I've, taken classes of self-study. I actually live in an Indian reservation now. And yet I was just shocked that the ceaseless, relentless violence against anybody who stood in the way of white expansion. It's always been a part of this country.
So you're just saying that the violence for white expansion has just always been part of the country. Even you weren't really, sounds like you weren't really aware of it as more recently.
Yes. So I think that perhaps some of what we're seeing is just the coming into the open of those things. And it reminds me of a line from a show about a Roman emperor who said, "Let all the poisons that are hiding in the mud hatch out."
So you think what might be happening is the violence that's always been there is really just coming to the surface.
Yes. And I would say, in particular for white people, we've been sheltered from a lot of it.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, especially for white people that have been sheltered from the violence.
Thank you. I feel heard.
Okay. Speak to Leo. First thing is, I was really excited to hear about your comments about valuing empathy, you know, how it could be used in the church. So I was like, yay, somebody gets it. So I was really kind of thrilled to kind of in the pre-session here to kind of hear those comments. And I wish everyone had that awareness, because we could really get something done with more people having that awareness.
So Edwin, you're as happy as I am that Empathy Circle might find a place in the church culture as we learn to be more empathetic.
Exactly. And then in terms of conformism, I think that conformism is based on fear. So people become afraid, so they conform out of fear. I think, you know, just addressing fear is important, that people do not feel afraid to speak out about whatever is, you know, going on for them.
So an underlying cause of conformity might be fear, and it's important to surface that so people become aware of their own fear so that they can better manage that and not just be reactive.
Yeah, and the society too, to address, you know, fear, make sure that people are not feeling afraid within society to combat that. And I think that what we're doing in the Empathy Circle is a format that I think brings fear down, because you know that you will be heard in an empathy circle. You can say anything you want, share any emotion, and you will be heard. And you'll be met with empathy to begin with. People might get pissed off when it's their turn to speak, but you will initially be met with empathy. And I think that that brings the fear level down.
So the power of the Empathy Circle is that you can express anything you want, including feelings, including the feeling of fear. And because you can articulate that and get feedback that you were heard, it can diminish the power of fear that is not put on the table and not recognized.
And I think that, yeah, it's, for me, I feel a sense of spaciousness and calmness within the framework of the Empathy Circle. I mean, we can bring, you know, opposing parties from the left and right together, but if I can get them into an empathy circle where they listen to each other, you know, the fear, the anxiety, the polarization, given enough time, I just almost guaranteed that it'll kind of work itself out and connection will be created.
So the protocol of the Empathy Circle really allows divergent views to be in dialogue with each other and to dissipate some of the polarity that we otherwise feel if those are not allowed to be expressed.
And I'm a strong advocate of free speech, that, you know, say what you want, and I make a point of it in the Empathy Circle. You know, it's there's no political correctness, you know, say whatever you feel called to say. But it's like, I think what's missing is free empathy. We need free speech, and the other side of the coin is free empathy, that somebody has to hear it. So I'm for free speech and free empathy.
Two sides of a coin. Free empathy, free speech requires free empathy, and that ability to listen to the person who's freely speaking. We need to freely listen, and you call that the power of empathy.
Yeah, and maybe it's mutual free speech and free empathy. So the mutuality, I think, is the other core ingredient there.
So mutuality is a key word. It's not my free speech. We each exercise free speech, and we each exercise free empathy.
And the second question, I don't know how much time I have, but the second question was who stated the significant quote, whether you may do, you shall fight on forever and ever. And it was Winston Churchill. And I would switch it to say, whatever we do, we shall empathize forever and ever and ever, because I think that you meet the sort of the so-called enemy with empathy. You try to empathize with them and bring them into an empathic dialogue. You know, shaking your head. It
So,
works.
So you identified Churchill as the author of that quote, but it's kind of an adversarial quote
Mhm.
against the Germans, and you'd prefer that we meet our adversary with empathy, because in that arena of the empathy circle, so-called enemies can hear each other and perhaps come to some resolution of their differences.
And there may be need for protective use of force to use enough force to keep people from doing some specific direct harm, but then to also bring it back into empathy after that, into an empathic dialogue after that. At least that's my philosophy, yeah.
So you're saying there are situations where we need force to protect the freedom of speech and the freedom of empathy. But the dialogue itself within the context of an empathy circle is where, again, our differences can be, if not resolved, at least mutually understood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thanks.
Thank you. So I will ask Linda, would you be my listener? Yes,
Okay,
there you
I'm
go.
ready. Yeah, I'm ready.
Thank you, Linda. Well, it's a privilege to be in the same room with Edwin, and who has devised this marvelous empathy circle protocol. And I see its applicability in government, in civil discourse, and as I mentioned before, in church discourse as well.
So you've counted a privilege to be in the room with Edwin and his empathy protocol, and you are glad that he see the benefit of empathy in different areas of society, including the church.
Rosa Parks was another person mentioned in our reading as someone who took a stand, and reflecting on my own career, I probably did not take a stand as well as I could have against when my progressive brand of religion was being suppressed or at least subdued. I didn't stand up for my progressive values as I might have.
Okay, so you're thinking about Rosie Parks and how she had the courage to stand up, and you're thinking that you wish you had had the courage to stand up for the more progressive side of your faith when it was being suppressed, that you stood up.
Today, I went to an online funeral of a bishop in Canada, in Victoria, British Columbia. And he was the oldest English-speaking Canadian bishop who had participated in the World Council of Bishops in 1962 to 65.
Wow. So a friend or bishop, it was his funeral, and you did the virtual funeral online. And you said he was old enough where he was a member of the Council of Churches in 1960.
It was the Vatican II Council of Bishops.
Okay, Council of Bishops, and it was in the 1960s. Okay.
He was a progressive, and he was renowned for standing up and speaking for the role of women in the church, and for the rights of the indigenous people, and for fair wage practices of the Canadian government. So he stood up, and he was honored at his funeral for the way he did stand up.
Yeah, so when he was living, he was a progressive, and he stood up for women in the church and the indigenous people, and fair labor, fair wages. And at his funeral, they talked about, or they honored the fact that he stood up.
So it might be only in our funeral will we be recognized for standing up for progressive values, but let it be as it is.
Okay, so Leo, you say it's probably going to be at our funerals when we get recognized for standing up for our progressive acts, but let it be what it is.
So the readings focus on the Holocaust, both in Russia and in Germany, and the huge numbers of people that were assassinated and murdered, and but it all starts with such in such small measures where resistance is possible. But if denied, things just snowball and get worse.
Yeah, you're speaking of the spread of communism in Germany and Russia, and it starts out small. Things start out small, and we ignore them and we just kind of let it go, and it grows and grows. It increases.
The example, it wasn't in this week, but the example of having Jewish shopkeepers having to display signs in their window or wearing the yellow stars.
Mm-hmm.
And that was accepted by the population, that became normative.
Yeah.
And
yeah, the population, when they imposed that law that they had to post the stickers on themselves and in the store windows, the rest of the population, the Jewish people had to do it. The rest of the population just accepted that as norm and just went along with it.
I fear for the laws being, I don't know the specifics, but laws being passed to suppress voting in our country.
Yes.
And again, if these laws are not resisted, we going to have another snowball effect. And we talked a couple of weeks ago about, people having to stand in line for 9 hours to vote. Well, that's unconscionable. And so it's happening in our age too, where we're creating us and a them, and trying to put down the them.
Yeah, you equate to some of what the Jews went through in terms of being identified as the, with the signs and the stickers or badges on, and the fact that people would just kind of ignore it and let it go, to what's going on in America today with this right to vote. That there all these restrictions are coming out, and you talked about people having to stand in the line for 9 hours just to cast a vote, cast their vote, and you fear that I don't know, what word, but you fear the fact that people are just kind of ignoring it and then accepting it as a norm, or maybe it needs to happen. You're afraid that it's going to snowball.
So I want to balance my love of empathy with a resistance to conform and to be empathetic to those who are trying to suppress somebody in our society.
Okay, I'm sorry. So you want to be empathetic to the people that are trying to conform?
Well, I want to be empathetic and exercise that practice. But on the other hand, I don't want to be wishy-washy about not resisting suppressive measures that I see in my own society.
You want to be empathetic, but you don't want to be wishy-washy or weak on those things that you think are important, worth standing up for. Yeah.
Yeah, and I need to stand out more, and I feel heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, I'm gonna pick Edwin for this one.
Listening.
I'm glad that y'all touched on voting, because I wanted to talk about that, and in terms of conformity, how one state is passing restrictive voting laws and then another state follows.
Here I want to talk about the issue of voting and how one state make difficult voting laws and then other states start doing it as well.
Yeah, and with no evidence that these changes need to be made. Nothing was broken, but they feel like they need to fix it.
And these laws are trying to fix something that's not broken.
Yeah, but so far there have not been as much uprising as I thought it would be, because I think people are associating these restrictive voting laws or proposals with, well, that'll just affect people of color.
So people haven't really stood up to these laws because they think, oh, it'll just affect people of color.
Yeah. So, but I think when we have the election, and when the people that have no transportation can't get to the polls, or there's only one polling place in a rural area and they have to travel for miles and stand in line, and when the people want to just drive up and drop the ballot off in the mailbox or mail it in, when all these convenient ways of voting impact other people besides just people of color, then I think there'll be more of an uprising.
So when all these restrictive laws really impact other people, white, etc., then when they are actually impacted, then maybe they'll stand up and address this as a problem.
Yeah, I'm hoping, I hope they don't go as Leo said and just kind of, look the other way and say no big deal.
So you're hoping that people don't just look the other way and just not take any action.
Yeah, you can't have democracy without voting. There has to be, even from kindergarten up to when we graduated, it was always, okay, let's take a vote. If you're playing on the playgrounds, it's okay, let's take a vote. If we're trying to decide what we're gonna have for dinner, okay, let's take a vote. So our whole society is built on everybody having a voice in the process.
So even from childhood, there was always the issue of let's take a vote, and you just heard it all the time. It was the idea was to have everyone be part of the process and have a voice in it.
Yeah, and that's how things were decided, and that's how things are decided. But empathy is good, but everybody is not going to be empathetic.
Yeah, there's empathy is good, but not everybody's going to be empathic.
Yeah, empathic. And I think it's going to take people going to the streets and protesting, hopefully peacefully protesting, to get Congress and the president to recognize how important the American people believe the right to vote is.
So it's like people are going to probably have to take to the streets to advocate for the importance of democracy or voting, and for the Congress and the president really to take note. You got to get to the streets.
Yeah, and I see, unfortunately, I see empathy. I have this picture in my head with in a boxing ring, and both sides come to the middle and box, and they get all bloody and they do the kickboxing and the whole deal, and then when both of them land on the mat just totally exhausted with no more energy, then they will engage in empathy.
Yeah, so maybe the model for empathy is people are just going to beat each other up, in the ring of battle, and when they're just totally exhausted, maybe then they'll try empathy.
Yeah, but I think we're going to have to act a fool before we can get people to the table.
Yeah, so you're going to have to act a fool before we can really get people to the table.
Yes, and I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'll speak to Joan next.
Okay.
Yeah, that's funny because I tell that story too, that Linda's saying that for couples, usually it's when things are about ready to split, then they go for the marriage counseling. So it's like until things are about to blow up, they don't. And I think about that too with politics. But I think we're heading towards that sort of this blow up. So maybe that creates the space for empathy.
Okay, you like to tell the story that with couples, when things are already at the breaking point, that's when they want to go to a counselor. And I kind of focused on that.
Yeah.
What did you say after that? Sorry.
Yeah, and maybe Linda's right that until the society is, about to just fall apart, they beat each other up. The Congress members are fist fighting in the Congress, in the halls. Maybe it takes that, before they really will say, well, let's try something else. This isn't working. Let's try empathy.
Okay, so maybe in the halls of Congress, maybe that's what we need is a real fist fight and beat each other up, but maybe there's another way to get to that same result.
It's maybe that they have to get to that point before they try something else. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, they have to get to that point before they try something else. Okay.
And I think that, Linda, that we can take empathy to the streets too. It's not just, that it's like we can say, we demand that Republicans and Democrats have empathy circles with each other on the topic of voting. So something like that, so that we actually, and we've done it with the empathy tents, like we've set up the empathy tent 30 times at least out in the public. So we got experience with taking it out there.
All right. So maybe you actually could have, I start blocking some of this, so it's going to be tough. You can have empathy circles between the Democrats and Republicans so that they would learn to be able to empathize with each other.
The main thing was, though, is we have to take it to the street.
Well, just like you did with the tent, with the right
Yeah.
and the left. Okay.
But we have to take it to the street. I agree with that. That you have to, you can't just sit at home. Oh, everybody please listen to each other. You got to get out there and be willing to put yourself on the line and get on the streets, I think.
Okay, but you do see where you can't sit home and twiddle your thumbs and say, oh, well, that you actually have to take it out there, out to the streets to do something.
Yeah, and we took the empathy tent out to the streets, out in public, and we had all kinds of articles, Fox and Friends mentioned it, Breitbart mentioned it, the local news mentioned it. So being out in the streets is where you really get your attention and your message amplified. So I think we do need to take the empathy movement to the streets.
So it was really productive to take the empathy project in the tent to the streets, because all kinds of conservative press became aware of it. Breitbart, Fox News, along with other news places. So you felt that this was a real boon to get outside with it.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thanks.
Okay, Greg, could you be my listener?
Yes.
Okay. Woo, there's a lot of dynamics going around in my head. I unfortunately, as much as I support empathy, I'm very practical about politics. And I have had many conversations at home about there's just so much that you can do with empathy. Okay, I'll stop.
You're fully on board with empathy and that approach. But when it comes to politics, you're practical minded, and you've had conversations at home about how far you can go with empathy.
Correct. And I'll just quickly go back to something Edwin said, and then Linda. As far as Churchill being adversarial, I feel like he was empathizing with his country. He was standing up with huge courage. No one else was able to stand up except Poland. And he felt that, okay, yeah, I can buckle down and just have the Nazis take over. And this was a huge thing to say that. And even people in his country said, oh, no, maybe we should, we can't. But if he hadn't done that, we wouldn't be talking today about democracy.
Yeah, you're feeling that actually Winston Churchill was not being adversarial as much as we might think, but he was being empathetic to his own people or his own country. And that was a very major act to stand up like that out of empathy for what would be good for his country.
Exactly. And as far as, I love that Linda was talking about the election, but I feel like Biden and the Democrats have been working their tail off. And it took, people are complaining, it took them a while to get to try to put something, the John Lewis and the other act through, but it was because back then, there were a lot of Democrats that did not want to change the filibuster. It took time. It took the several months until we could actually get to the point where now we have two Democrats holding up the works here, because Biden and all the other Democrats have come around that no matter what we do, nothing is more important than protecting our elections.
Okay, it may seem that the Democrats and Biden were not getting busy in protecting voting rights as they might have, but it's probably not the case, because behind the scenes, they had to be working hard for a 3 months to try to get many Democrats who were opposed to changing the filibuster to come over. And that time was effective. All Democrats except 2 came over to being willing to change the filibuster. So it's, yeah. So,
Great. And one of the big concerns is, I don't think that this is something by taking the streets. If a state legislature puts a law into place, unfortunately, that has power. And that's why this is something that Congress really has to do. And I'm hoping that they can take little pieces of what we need and be able to pass something. And there's something else really important I want to say. I'll stop there.
okay. The fact of a law being in place, but that actually has effect now, requires the action of the Congress. I think you mean state laws. So that Congress has to act, because that would override the state laws in protection of voting rights. And it sounds like you're saying there's a bit of a conflict there with empathy.
Okay, not sure the last comment you made. Would you repeat the last comment?
Yeah, just go on and finish, yeah.
What? My time's up?
No, just, yeah, it is, but go ahead and finish where you were going with this. I'm giving you some additional time, Joan, so you can finish where you were going with this.
Oh, I can go on with that? Okay. The one comment that I feel is even more important than the voter suppression is that the states are figuring out, the red states, how to take our votes and not count them or just toss them out. It has nothing to do with having people stand in line or anything. And this is really the critical area that the lawyers are out there working on it, but it's going to take something from Washington to change that.
Okay, so the red state, the Republican states are figuring out how to throw votes into the garbage bin, and that will take action from Washington to straighten out.
Right.
Okay, now, yeah.
Thank you. And I don't know what you said, Linda, but I think my time's up, right?
Yes.
Okay, I feel fully heard. Thank you,
Yes.
Craig.
Sure. Leo, would you like to listen?
Okay.
It sounds to me like what Edwin was saying reflects something I heard someone, this activist woman who she works hard, democratic causes and more left of democratic causes. And so I'll pause there.
So you're referring to a woman you know who's an activist in politics, Democratic Party, and even more progressive policies than that.
Right. And she said something that I think is kind of what Edwin was saying. She went on this kind of retreat and she came back, and all this work she's been doing for child health care, early education funding, stop the nuclear weapons, all this stuff. She sort of said, step back. What we need is a new mind.
So this woman is very active for early childhood and healthcare and against the nukes. Did a retreat and realized she wanted to, even more fundamental would be a change in mindset.
Yes. And so I kind of see that what Edwin's saying about taking empathy to the streets. In other words, I would personally demand, I would go to the streets. Actually, I do. Every Friday, I go down to the corner here in Santa Fe with the Veterans for Peace, and we hold up signs, say, we demand the end to nuclear weapons. But maybe the first way to get there, or the best way to get there, might be say, we demand that anti-nukes people and pro-nuke people begin to have empathy and to talk with empathy.
So you are a practitioner of being in the streets. You protest against nuclear weapons, but perhaps instead of your banner saying no more nukes, it should say, we demand people of opposite points of view get together and practice the empathy circle that Edwin provides.
Yeah. And that I put a note here earlier. I think it was somebody said that the big value of empathy is shrinking fear. So I'm really afraid of these nuclear weapons industry people. I think they're really evil. But if I can learn to, have empathy, and then my fear diminishes, I can get a breath, and then I can talk to them and I can find out what do they really want and what are their beliefs. And then maybe then they'll listen to me, and that kind of just winds, it ratchets down the tension,
So you're recognizing that in your activism, you would like to recognize the providers of nuclear weaponry, not to call them evil, but to say, I want to be in dialogue with you. Nobody's all evil, but I need to hear where you're coming from, and you need to hear where I'm coming from. And we need a safe space to talk to each other empathetically. So I'm going to change my banner sign, not protest you as such, but protest our lack of encountering one another.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. I feel fully heard.
All righty.
Well, Greg, I think you put a whole new spin on activism. And
you want him to listen to you, Greg?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You can go back to him.
Sure, I'll go back to Greg.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Greg, you'd be my listener.
Sure.
And I heard you put a new spin on activism as including the ones you're protesting against, that they are part of the solution. And the trick is to get people in the same space to share their different points of view.
Okay, so a new spin on activism is to get people into the same space in a way where they can share their points of view.
I would love to be in a room with Republicans and in a safe space to share our differences with an empathy circle. So maybe I need to set up a tent in my public square and look for that diversity of opinion and get them to sit down for 30 minutes and empathetically listen to each other.
And you think it would be great to be with empathy circle with Republicans and maybe even set up a empathy tent in your public square, have a wide diversity of viewpoints or opinions in empathy circles.
Yes, I think a lot I don't know if Edwin has statistics, but I imagine there's more Democrats showing up for empathy circles than Republicans. That's simply my bias. But I have a sister who's on a different end of the political spectrum than I, and I'm not sure she would accept an invitation for me to sit down in an empathy circle. So there's a certain degree of tolerance and respect for the other who is different that is a requirement for people to sit down in an empathy circle.
Okay, you'd be interested in the statistics about how many Democrats versus Republicans have volunteered to engage in empathy circles, and you suspect that it would probably be more likely that Democrats would be that kind of leaning toward openness and receptiveness. And your sister on the opposite end of the political spectrum, you're kind of doubtful she would accept an invitation to an empathy circle.
That's right. That might be my bias, and that may need to be corrected. I can only test that out, I guess, by setting up that empathy tent.
Yes, that may be your bias, which would require testing, some experimental testing by setting up the empathy tent.
Thank you, Greg. I feel fully heard, and I'll pass it on to you and other speakers.
Okay. Well, I think I'll pass because I feel like I just spoke, and I'm.
You can select someone and then just say, I feel fully heard, and that passes it on.
Oh, okay. Linda, will you like to listen? And I'll just pass the baton.
I hear
you. I feel
you.
fully heard.
Okay, I hear you. I'm gonna go back to Joan, if you would hear me. You know, we were let me hit this talking about voting, and you know, and you did bring up a real concern, and that's the people that are being put in these election officials that's being put in place in different states to oversee the election, decide what ballots will be accepted and which ones will not, and you know, the vote, whether they'll accept the vote or not. You know, that is scary, and unfortunately, it's the state has control over that. But I believe that if the federal government and these two that are holding up this bill, and I can't believe here we are in 22 talking about the right to vote.
Okay, when you hear about state officials trying to overturn elections, throw out ballots, and all kinds of shenanigans, you find that quite scary. But you feel, would you repeat the last part with the federal government? You feel
that if the federal government was more if they, and it's only two people that's holding up that right to vote bill. That's what I was saying. I was starting to say if they would be more forceful with their legislation, but it's only two people that's holding up this bill, and I'm sad. It is sad to me that here we are in 2022 still talking about and fighting over the right to vote.
right, and you keep feeling that something should be more forceful in Washington. It's just these two individuals that are holding up everything, and you just find this quite upsetting.
Yeah, and sometimes, I'm sorry. Sometimes I wonder if an intentional smoke screen is being put up, because I know COVID has been big in the news. It's every evening, every day you turn it on. That's the headline, and then for the last week and a half, it's been Ukraine, and and that's the headline news. And there was some mention about voting early on, but now nobody's mentioning it. Nobody's talking about it.
Okay, so you're wondering if some kind of smoke screen is in process from Washington, because it was all about voting, everything. And now you're saying all the headlines are not about voting, but about Ukraine. And you're wondering what happened and what's going on.
Yeah. So you have the news and the media, because that's what we depend on, whichever channels you watch. But they're focused on Ukraine and whether or not they're going to go to war. And now they're starting to talk about the trucks that are blocking the bridge in Canada, to Michigan. And so now that's a big deal. And it seems like everything keeps coming up except voting. Okay,
so now it's not only Ukraine that, they're it looks like we're getting very close to war. They're talking about that, or they're getting very close to
Yeah.
war. Also in Canada, you've got the anti-vaxxers out there demonstrating. So we see that in the news, and you're wondering, okay, yes, those things are happening, but what is happening about the election?
And so I say smoke screen because I think the media has to take some responsibility, because they know the public mostly will go to the TV for news. And whatever they consider to be sensational that will get them ratings, that becomes the headline.
Okay, so you're feeling that everybody, the public is very concerned about this, but the press and the news tend to just go for, okay, what's really going to catch sensationalism? What's going to catch attention? And that's what we see out there.
Yeah, and that's the reason I say it appears that the public, we the people, will have to take to the streets. We the people will have to take to the streets and protest, raise hell, boycott, do something traumatic to get the government and everybody else to start back to thinking about voting rights.
And your thought is that everybody needs to think about really having a huge impact by getting out there, protesting, doing whatever we can to draw attentions to voting, because it's not happening.
Right, and I feel fully heard.
Thank you. Let's see. Very good. I guess I'll speak to Edwin.
Okay, listening.
Well, I'm going to address some of what Linda said, because it's been, I've been following this every second, and Indivisible has. The problem is they tried everything. And the last thing was trying to have the talking filibuster. And all they were doing with Manchin and Simica was, all they had to do was say, yes, we'll try, try this. It wasn't a vote. It wasn't a vote. And they felt like, okay, if they can do that, then they could actually get it, have everybody talk, have everybody, all the Republicans, it could be, twice that they could get up there. And then there's a regulation where they could actually pull a vote. So now you can bet your bottom dollar that it's just as important as it was. But as far as a political move right now, that was the last thing I heard, was they're going to take parts of it and try to get bills through, because they have to do something. And unfortunately, those two Democrats are really, sorry.
Okay. Well, yes, even we've been following this voting issue. It was just two Democrats holding up even a talking filibuster. And so you've just been following it sort of step by step. And now, as you understand it, they're going to be dividing the different parts of the bill and try to get sections through.
Right. I also, to me, this is one of the major reasons I wanted to do this, but I do want to go back to some of the comments about talking to Republicans. It's not like I'm anti speaking to Republicans, but I want to get a little personal here.
Yeah, so it's not like you're against talking with Republicans, but you want to get personal kind of on the topic.
What I find, and this is in Edwin's family, there is somebody that supported Trump. I have tried all kinds of methods to send information that's factual, whether it's about the government or about the vaccine or whatever. And what I see on a personal level, and it's magnified out there, it's not talking about somebody that has different opinions on issues.
Yeah, so you're wanting to address a specific person, like in my family, who is Republican, and you've sent information, and it's not really just talking about the issues with them.
No, it is the difference between talking to somebody who respects truth and lies.
So it's really like, it's talking with them, do they value truth, or they just accept or value lies? And so that's sort of this choice.
And this is what we see in Congress. We have 73% of the Republicans in the country feel that the election was stolen.
Yeah, so it even scales up to the national level, where 73% of the Republicans think the lie of that the election was stolen. So it's even scales to that level.
Right. So when I have tried on a personal level to the one Trumper, well, actually, there's a group of them and his family, to try, it was a sample. And I realized, where do I want to put my energy? Do I want to put my energy with national and state Republicans that listen to and support lies? Or can I try to make a difference by moving through with other Democrats that want to do something for democracy?
So the approach, you're deciding what approach to take. Do you want to spend your time talking with Republicans who are just supporting lies? Or do you want to get together with Democrats who will support democracy?
And find actions that, that we can take. I totally think that it's a great idea, to talk to somebody that has a difference of opinion on issues, but this country has come to a new low point. We have so many, I don't even want to call them Republicans. I don't know what to call them. They do not understand reality, or they ignore reality. We don't know really. Yeah.
Yeah, so you just feel that there's people who we don't even know what to call them, but that are just like ignoring reality and maybe having some frustration and just kind of hopelessness around dealing with them.
Right, but we can, and I think what Linda was saying about taking, time.
Go ahead, finish your sentence. Yeah, finish your sentence. Taking time.
Okay, the last sentence, taking to the streets about the election. I was really pleased with a lot of groups and a lot of groups of color. They've been coming out there. They've been demonstrating. It is happening. It is happening. And I agree with you. It would be nice if the press really magnified the most important stories. Thank you.
So yeah, you wish that the press would magnify the important story of voting rights, and sounds like you're glad to see a lot of protesters advocating for that.
I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay, speak to Linda.
Okay, dope.
Yeah, so I think to address sort of the I guess the lies, the people kind of being in their own world, is if you can sit down with them and have them feel heard, and then for them to hear you, you sort of start getting past that conspiracy theory, and then the people who shake their heads, the people who shake their heads when they're not supposed to be shaking, commenting.
Okay, so you believe that if people with opposing views, if they could just sit down and talk to each other, they would kind of, that talk, empathic talking and listening will kind of break through some of that conspiracy theory, in spite of people shaking their heads when they're not
when it's not their turn to speak.
Okay.
So with the empathy tent, we had, the political right come to Berkeley, and the political left counteracted. We set up the empathy tent really early, and the conservatives were the first to come. And, I hadn't really talked with conservative, activists before. And I was like really nervous, geez, what are these people like? And I was actually had some anxiety and fear. I think Greg mentioned some fear, about talking to the other side. But I went over, I had a little box that said empathy kisses on it, and it had little chocolates. I said, yeah, hi, would you like an empathy kiss? and I gave him a free card, which said, free empathy, come to the empathy tent for 10 minutes of free listening. And so we started talking. Yeah.
Okay, so you're telling us about the time you set up the tent at Berkeley, your tent, the empathy tent at Berkeley, and you set up early, and the first group of people that arrived, whatever was going on, they were the conservatives or Republicans, and you had never really engaged with people with opposing political views before. And so you were a little nervous with the approach, but you went forward with your chocolate kisses and your card, and they came to the tent.
Yeah, we chatted and I talked to him, and actually, as long as I was just listening and it was mutual kind of respect, it was absolutely had a really positive discussion. And yeah, I'll pause there.
You're saying that as long you were both in dialogue, and you found that as long as there was mutual respect and one took the opportunity to listen to the other, everything was, it flowed.
And another time, the same situation happened, and some of us from the empathy tent were sitting on the lawn having an empathy circle, and one of the conservatives came over, and I said, "Oh, come on, join us in the empathy circle," and he was this kind of burly, big guy, and he sat. We actually did an empathy circle for 20 minutes, and at the end, he said, "I protect people, and if you need protection, I'm here for you."
Okay, so you were actually conducting an empathy circle on the lawn, and sort of with that going out with the tents, but you were on the lawn, you were doing the circle, and this big burly guy, who turned out to be a conservative, walked up, and you all invited him into the circle. He joined the circle and participated for about 20 minutes with the empathic listening, and when it was over with, he got up and he offered his services to protect anybody in that circle that needed protection.
And he said, "I'm ex-military, and so it was just our listening to him, including him, seeing his humanity, and he was like, great, it was like we kind of overcame any, sort of a barrier to the point where he was wanting to offer his protection in case we got in trouble.
And just, you think listening to him and acknowledging his humanity kind of broke through any resistance that he may have had. And
then I set up the empathy tent near Sacramento, and there was the far left were on different corners, and then the pro-Trump were on another corner. I went over to the pro-Trump side, and there was this big sort of biker guy, and I started walking up to him, and he says, "Where's the chocolates?" He had been to Berkeley and knew that we were handing out chocolates. He wanted to know where the chocolates were. And I said, "Oh, I forgot the chocolates, but I'll give you a hug." And I gave him a hug,
So strangely enough, you're telling us you were doing another circle in Sacramento, and so you got the left on one corner on one side, and the right, on the other side, opposing sides of the street. And you went over to the right side, to the group that are conservative, and this big burly guy, motorcycle type, he walked up to you and he says, "Where's the chocolate?" And it turned out that he was in Berkeley. He remembered the chocolates from Berkeley. He was looking for them in Sacramento, and you had to apologize. And he accepted a hug, and since you didn't have the kisses.
And I got to just finish this. It's a short piece. Is that he said, "At first we saw you handing out those chocolates. We were wondering what it was. Was it poison? Was it X-Lax? But then we figured it was Berkeley. It was probably LSD, so that was okay."
He told you that him and his friends were wondering what was in the chocolate. Was it X-Lax or something else? But they figured, Berkeley is LSD, so we'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. I feel fully heard.
Okay, that's great. Okay. Let me see. I want to talk to, I'm gonna go back to John. Because I want to speak on what you were speaking about talking to people that have opposing views. And I tell everybody, my mantra is, you can understand without agreeing.
I'm sorry, the last comment, could you?
You can understand without agreeing.
Oh, okay. So you wanted to discuss with me the talking with somebody with opposing views, that you can abstain without agreeing.
You can understand.
You can entertain without.
Understand. And, you know, and I think that's what the empathy circle is all about. It's a safe place. There is no judgment. There is no commentating. It's just listening.
Okay, so it's a safe place, the empathy circle, and that's one of the advantages. You just listen to what they have to say, no
Yes.
judgment.
And I found that people will believe what they want to believe, and they will accept what they want to accept. And you go ahead.
So that it doesn't matter what they believe when you're listening to them. It's just giving them acceptance.
Yeah, people will believe what they want to believe. Yes, and they will accept what they want to accept.
They'll believe what they want to believe, and they'll accept what they want to accept.
It's all about wanting.
It's all about wanting.
Yeah, so if a person wants to receive new information, wants to consider other alternatives or other, you know, facts, then they will. And if they don't want to, they won't.
Okay, so if they don't want to accept new facts, they won't. And if they will, if they are willing to, they will accept facts.
Yeah. So sometimes we just have to accept the person, even though we don't agree with their beliefs.
Okay, so you're saying that you just have to accept somebody for who they are, even though you don't have the same beliefs as they do.
Yes, and I say that because I did lose well, she was somewhere between a friend and an associate, but we enjoyed each other's company. We'd go to lunch and dinner and, you know, different deals, but totally different perspectives with politics. And
is this, I missed who this person is, but
yeah, she was sort of a friend.
Oh, a friend. Okay. Even though you're friends with somebody, you are on a different page completely. It sounds like with politics. Yeah.
And we don't speak anymore because she was sending me information, conspiracy stuff. And I told her, and I asked her to stop sending it. And I said, stop sending me this political stuff. And she said, it's not political.
Oh, so now you've kind of had to stop communicating because she just kept sending all kinds of conspiracy information, and you requested for your friend, please don't send this. But then her comment was, this isn't political.
And I really, it was her that stopped, you know, connecting with me. Because she is strong-willed. So
she was what?
Strong-willed. And she gets something in her head, she's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you had no choice because it wasn't going to change at all.
Yeah. So, you know, I've just learned in my old age that if a person doesn't want to change their minds, if they're not open to new facts, you're just wasting your energy.
And you found in quotes old age that it's no point if you're talking with somebody and they have a different way of looking at it this is not going to, there's no way that you're going to change that.
Yeah. And I'll just end with this. This guy told me this a long time ago, and I still think he was crazy. He said, truth is relative.
Huh.
That was years before Trump, over 20 years ago. Truth is
Wow.
relevant.
And
like,
there
okay.
was somebody in your life, I did miss who it was, that
Nobody.
Nobody, but it's a quote that you have always thought about, and it was 20 years ago.
Mhm.
Truth is relative.
Yeah. No, it's not. Thank you. I feel fully heard. It's not. That was him. I was like, whatever.
Okay, I'll talk to Leo.
Is it time to go to large group? Last 20 minutes or?
We have 5 minutes, 4 minutes for a turn. So,
He's an authoritarian.
You're
We have
good.
5 minutes.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Joe.
go ahead.
You've got 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, I do agree with Linda that I don't want to waste my energy. And I feel like what's different here, and this is why I wanted to discuss this book, is that we are in a crisis. We are at a precipice. We are at a point at the next election that we could lose our democracy. And I feel that is my energy going to go to?
So you have great concern, even anxiety about the next election. And it's a critical time. You don't want to waste your energy on people that don't want to practice empathy with you, who may not be open to divergent points of view. But you want to spend your energy on what you feel is most urgent, which is the coming election in November.
Right. And it's going back to the book, they said that it happens slowly but quickly when they were talking about the Nazi acceptance, people just started just going along with what was happening. And now I am really going to get super personal because I'm from a Jewish family. And I always felt, strong, awful feelings about the Holocaust. But I kind of put it aside. I felt like, well, we don't live in a world like that anymore. And what I'm finding about these lies is all of a sudden I began to realize, how could anybody kill based on lies?
So lies can start off slowly, and if we don't resist them, that can be slow, but it can snowball quickly. And even to a point of willing to kill others based on lies that we did not resist at the beginning.
Right. So I have very, very strong feelings when I see people, they can believe what they want to believe. That's unreality. But look what it ended up doing. And we're in a situation now where there were conspiracy theories, but I felt like it was not almost half of the country.
So you have strong feelings partly because of your Jewish ancestry, and you've seen the horrors of the Holocaust, and you fear for democracy in our own country. I saw the time that Linda gave us. So did I feed back to you adequately,
yes.
John?
Go right ahead. Yeah.
I think it's time then to
No,
go
no.
to large group.
No.
That was the pause sign.
Yeah, I was telling her to pause. You keep
that was
going.
pause.
No,
Yeah.
I actually go ahead because it's our last opportunity. So I feel fully heard, and go ahead, Leo.
Well, I know we just have a minute.
I think we don't have enough time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, about a minute.
Do you want to just do a quick debrief or
Yes.
something? And we've got about 3 minutes.
Start with Leo and
2
ask him,
minutes.
yeah, how do you feel about the group? What did you feel, feedback?
Well,
Just real quick.
I feel like as an action, I have to look at Wisconsin laws, what election laws have been passed, so I know the particulars, and rather than just what general news are telling me. And I need to learn about other states too. What are the details about these laws that suppress voting? And I remember a quote somebody said, the people who divide us into an us and a them are the people who are not awake, because we are all one. Or as Pogo likes to say, we have met the enemy and he is us.
Yes, that's true. Thank you. All right, Greg,
Well, this
just
this is the-
feedback on your experience today.
yeah, this is the first circle where I've seen in this series that there've been some serious actually differences of ideas of what empathy is about and how it works. And so I'm interested in that. So that was interesting, and I'd like to talk about that some more sometime.
And Joan?
I felt like we had a very interesting conversation. We covered a lot of ground, and I particularly like the fact that we were able to look at the book and really relate it to our critical factor here, the elections.
Edwin?
I loved what Greg was saying about a new form of activism, because I think that's what we need, is an activism that, is assertive in bringing people together. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, this was a very smooth flowing circle, and I want to encourage Greg to do that. Put the sign up and say, let's talk, and see what happens. Your protest fines, rather than down with the nuke, say, let's talk. See if that generates some interest. But it was a good group. It was good. And we stayed with the book, the theme of the book, what was going on in the book. So I don't need to leave, right? We're here.
No, it's gonna move us into the main room. I guess we do. This is actually a room. We're not in the breakout room. So
so we need to leave the room.
You have to go. Yep.
Leave the room. Okay, I'm clicking the blue button. Then we're going. Yeah.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Let's see, is Larry there?
He's over here.
Oh, there you are. Do you want to facilitate, or just us in this last? We have a question. Any insights from the questions or the chapters?
Somebody needs to mute.
Yeah. Sally, can you turn off the radio there, or mute where we hear this radio go? I think it's there, or somebody. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, Larry.
All right, thank you, Linda. All right, so we'd like to wrap up and go around and get feedback from everyone. How was the empathy circle tonight? Reflecting on the questions and the experience of tonight, using the empathy circle for human beings to be able to listen to one another. And I'll just go around the screen. Glenn, can I start with you? How was it tonight?
It was a great discussion, and we really covered so much territory and ideas in the chapters. And I'd say we were left questioning. We were left seeing the power of standing out, seeing the power of integrity, but also seeing that the context made it problematic in a way that wasn't probably true before. So we were left with both some hopeful thoughts and some pessimistic ones.
Thank you, Glenn. And Greg, could I hear what your experience was like tonight?
Yes, I was really interested in we talked somewhat about the process of empathy circles and empathy itself. And I kind of had to look at what do I think the limitations are versus the advantages are. And it was kind of challenging to me.
Thank you, Greg. And Donna, would you share your experience with us, please?
Yes, I was in Glenn's group and others. It was a great group. I think having a little more time helped. I think we discussed things very thoroughly. We had opportunities and it was very insightful. I think we looked at what we've learned from the book, but also how our times might have some differences. So it's a good group, good discussion.
Thank you.
And people were good listeners. We're getting used to it, I guess.
Randy, would you share your experience with us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was with Glenn and Donna, and so very much of a similar feeling about us being able to dig into some of these questions about how complex it can be to live up to our values in the way that that Tim talks about in the book, and especially given how times have changed and how our media environment is very different, and that impacts things a lot. And so in this session today, I did feel, I think, more challenged than I felt in sessions past, and I really enjoyed that.
Thank you, Randy. And Celine, would you share your experience, please?
Yeah. Lively discussion. I'm glad I suggested we have the last 5 minutes just sharing without any process. And I think for myself, I keep waiting for a message that gives me hope, the place where I can sign up so that my next actions are going to be very impactful. It hasn't happened yet, but I noticed how much I want it. Oh, good. Here I got my answer. Vote for Edwin.
Major impact. Yeah.
Ask and you shall get an answer. Thank you.
There's your answer. All right. And Leah, would you share, please?
I think we pushed. Of course, we had Mr. Empathy in our breakout, and I think to really take on the empathy mindset, we need to embrace the other, however we define the other, as part of us, and rather than us and a them. And the readings of Timothy Snyder set up the good guys against the bad guys. But empathy says, no, we've met the enemy. He is us, as Pogo said. And empathy the way we set up empathy circles and everything, there's a mindset that has to, from the very onset, accept the other who we might have a prejudice is going to be so contrary to us. We have to respect them in their difference from the very beginning.
Thank you, Leo. And Joan, would you share, please?
All right. Actually, I was in the same group with Mr. Empathy, but because my orientation is supportive of that, but really looking at the critical situation we're at now, at the precipice of losing our democracy, we were able to relate a lot of what is in the book to the election system now, and we spent time on that, and I really did appreciate that conversation and the balance that we had in our group. So thank you.
Thank you, Joan. And Judith, would you share, please?
Well, someone mentioned complexity here. I'm not sure who it was in this larger group. I think I came away with it, the complexity of empathy, and we began with some stories that elicited deep empathy, I think, in all of us for the speaker and speakers. And and the hope of a kind of Buddhist impermanence, that there's impermanence in life and things are changing. But then also the powerful forces in the world that, as one of our folks said, are engaged in economic control and in power and in silencing. And so how do we hold both hope, belief, and also how do we come up against the complexity of those who might want to control and silence us, and the pain and suffering that has historically gone along with that. Yeah, that's what I have to say. So it was a great group, really. Each time has been gone to some great depths I didn't think we'd get. I didn't anticipate. So, yeah.
Thank you, Judith. And Yoran?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was in a group with Randy, and it was really like going in depth on really topics of like demonstrations, protests, also making me think like, yeah, protests, is it like the only way? Is there does it have like always the consequences that you hope? Maybe there are other ways, and like all these questions came up, like, okay, empathy is nice, but what if there's like extreme violence facing you? Maybe that's not, like, empathy is not going to work. Or yeah, it was very thoughtful for me to listen to everybody. So yeah.
Thank you, Yoran. And Jana, would you share, please?
I'd like to share gratitude to our group for all the kindness and love and hope. I really appreciate our utopian vision and everyone's shared wish to practice nonviolence in the face of violence. And we reflected on martyrdom and what that might entail for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. And Linda, would you share, please?
Oh, okay. I was thinking of another Linda. The group was, I really enjoyed the conversation today. And we did talk about how the paramilitary has been used in the past and could be used in the future, to assert power that we may want to resist, but or may not. And we talked about voting and the resistance to voting that's going on now, the laws that are being passed to restrict voting, and how close we're coming, as John said, to the precipice of our democracy. And voting is one of the legs of one of the four legs of the foundation of democracy. We talked about that. Without voting, you have a choice. There's no democracy, and we need to pay attention.
Thank you, Linda. And Deirdre, would you share, please?
I was just really taken with the process today, the experience of being in the group and going through the questions and listening and holding space for each other set us up for a final moments together where we held space. And it felt so right, because I felt like we had been sort of practicing this craft, and we were able to show up in a way that I hope was meaningful in the end. And thank you for taking that time. Thank you, Jenna, for asking if we wanted to have that space for a discussion, because it took us to a different place. But the word that's staying with me right now is impermanence. Like, yes, this too shall pass, but if we value it, we have to make sure that we can keep it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deirdre. And Sally, would you share, please?
She's mowing the lawn. She just got to turn off her phone.
Yeah, she's still on mute.
Sally was called away. And Sally was wonderful in her group. She came up with some beautiful, beautiful visions of peace and empathy circles and harmony. And I'm following Sally from here on out. She was awesome. Thank you, Sally. Thank you. And I'll just share that I honestly have never come across anything that allows human beings to get together and not pick up stones to kill one another, but listen to one another. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. It really does. This empathy circle is relatively simple and very impactful on the way that we human beings can finally communicate in peace. So keep coming back. I'm going to keep coming back. Thank you. And back to Edwin. I think, did I miss anyone? I hope I didn't. All right, back to
everyone. Thanks, Larry. Yeah, for me, it was the top delightful group, very insightful, great stuff. Topics came up. The topic of speaking out, what keeps us from speaking out is fear. And so really to address fear, and I think that what we're doing here is a container that allows everyone to speak up, and it inhibits us feeling afraid, to speak up, because you'll be heard. And so I talked about free speech and free empathy is the other side. You can speak up, say whatever you want, and you get heard with empathy. The thing that really struck me was Greg does anti-nuke demonstrations every week, holds up signs, and I just saw the light bulbs go off saying, well, instead of just saying against nukes, stop nukes, it's like, we want a dialogue with the pro-nuke side. So he's going to hold up signs, says, we want a dialogue with the pro-nuke sides. Let's have an empathy circle or democracy circle. So I'm really looking forward to hearing a report on that. I did post a volunteer. If you're interested in volunteering for the campaign, I did put the link in there for Celine. So that's still there in terms of what can you do. You can help on the campaign. And then we have our feedback for the circle, if you can fill that out, just to give any comments, thoughts about the circle. And so I think we're right on time. So if there's anything else, Joan, as organizer, we're all good. So see you next week, and thanks for being here.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Sally's gone.
And if the facilitators want to stay back, just to need any debrief.
All right.
Oh, let me stop the recording.